John Company 2nd Edition is, in my opinion, not one shared with the rest of Team Shut Up and Sit Down, mind, a great work of art. The reactions to it around my table are some of the most immediate and powerful that I have ever seen any game produce. It is a nuclear payload of feeling that is more explosive and unique than 99% of the games that pass through my shelves. As a game, it is a heady mix of fiery negotiation, hard strategy, and soft role-playing that make it one of my new favorites. On the flip side, around 50% of the people who I played this game with said they never wanted to play it again. One person said it was disgusting, and even I recommend that you don't buy it due to its ferocious rules overhead, prohibitive cost, and mechanical and thematic stickiness. This company ain't gonna John itself. Less boogie. So, this is John Company, 2nd Edition, a 2022 remaster of sorts to brothers Cole and Drew Worley's 2017 game of the same name. Now, if you've been around in modern hobby board games for any length of time, then one of those designers will certainly ring a bell for you. Cole's breakout success route places him somewhere on many folks' Mount Rushmore of modern designers, and his more divisive follow-up Oath is in the running for my favourite game of all time. Notably, however, both of these games' harsher realities on the nature of factionalism and historiography, respectively, were softened in later games' publishing, lavishly cutesified through the artwork of Kyle Ferrin. For the freak shit, Cole and Drew team up together to publish under Whirligig Games, the source of the much lauded 2nd edition of Pax Pamir. Check out No Pun Included's spot-on review for more of that, and now followed by John Company 2nd Edition. I've not played the original John Company, and wow, help, it looks like a panic attack in Excel. A board game made for a history assignment by the kid who likes Victoria 3 a little bit too much. But this 2nd edition is a refinement and reimagining of that original design. I'm reliably told that the change is night and day, creating a game that is more of an exhaustive exploration of its central themes, and also less of an ordeal to look at. But what the heck is this game? Let's get the uncomfortable big picture out of the way first. John Company is a game where between 1 and 6 players will take on the roles of wealthy families, starting, running, and profiteering from the East India Trading Company, the state-backed organization variously responsible for almost half of all global trade during the peak of its operation, a company military larger than that of most nations at the time, the birth of the British Empire and mass colonial rule, overseeing a famine that killed an estimated 1/3 of Bengal, several opioid addiction outbreaks and their subsequent wars across China, and a spectacular crash in the 1820s despite multiple government bailouts. These people were responsible for one of the most disgusting enterprises to ever touch the planet, and this game asks you to spend between 3 and 5 hours of your life playing as them. You can see why there's a warning on the front cover of the manual. You can see why it's a big ask to get your friends to sit down to it, and you can see why this is going to be a long review. So let's put a shape to this game. What do you do in a round of John Company? John Company is, at its heart, a negotiation game strapped to an economic game, which in turn is strapped to a gambling game. Players will be making deals, doing trades, and rolling dice to try and accrue the most points by the time the game closes. Differently to a lot of negotiation or economic games, however, is the fact that players do not run their own individual enterprises to make individual money. Instead, they collectively pilot just one organization, the titular John Company itself, that players only control individual limbs of at any given time. In real terms, the setup might look like this. You might be the chairman and the director of military affairs, sure, but the player to your left is the manager of shipping, and to their left is the director of trade. All of whom might need convincing to do their job in a direction that helps you, or indeed the company itself. See, not only does the game present wildly asymmetric setups in regard to how big a slice of the company each individual player has at the starting line, causing differing investments in its success, but that investment can change over time as board members retire from their positions, sell their shares, or are unceremoniously fired for f***ing up their job. playing fast and loose with company money. This can lead to game states where everyone's slices are relatively equal, turning the experience into an almost cooperative one, with minor profiteering and scheming on the fringes. But it just as easily leads to game states that are tonally similar to a single cold hot dog being thrown to a pack of hungry rats. A crab bucket of sinking ship mentality where everyone wants to get out having lost the least as the company burns around them, milking the last scrap of power that they've got left. Most games sit somewhere in between, a shifting board of directors and variable turn-by-turn revenue making the game into a spider web of player politics, where everyone is just trying to get members of their family into the hiring line at the exact right moment to make their money and retire before things go south. These games are the tabletop equivalent of basically every episode of Succession, but where every single character is Tom Wambsgans.
I can't reveal my sources. But it's correct.
So that's the basic pitch, and with that out of the way, we can now get into the exhaustive process of explaining how the roughly 17-step rounds of this game actually work. If you feel as though you don't need to know the ins and outs of this, then here's a timestamp. But before you click away, some practical words on how the teach is actually implemented into the game. John Company's 2nd edition is maybe the only game that I have played where it has a rolling teach that actually works, that actually suits the kind of game that it is. For those unfamiliar with the term, a rolling teach is a method of rules explanation where one player learns all the rules up front and then after a brief introduction just starts the game. No upfront teaching whatsoever. Players will have almost no idea of what they're doing strategically as the concepts of the game are explained to them in real time, as and when they are needed, but they'll quickly click into how a round operates and are comforted by how the individual actions are not all that difficult. There's just a lot of them. Most players will have their hands held through a bumpy first round, but be ready to take the training wheels off by the second, and then tearing each other to non-negotiable pieces by the third, which is kind of outstanding for a game that is this mechanically complex and unusual. In fact, I'd compare the experience of teaching John Company for the first time to be that of DMing a role-playing game, a connection that's alluded to in the introduction sheet in the box. You take such an active role in teaching and running things that it leads to an entirely different satisfaction and joy. But it's a prospect that you should be aware of before even considering buying this box. And this is where I'll give my buyer's advice, something that I will rarely do throughout the rest of this video. Not only must you have a group in mind before dropping $120 on this thing, or $150 if you spring for the deluxe metal coins, which in a rare move from us, I do actually recommend. Not only do you need to have that group in mind, but you also need to make peace with being the John Company guy. Being the one who enjoys the spotlight, being the one who is going to teach a board game to a cluster of people for upwards of an hour with constant questioning afterwards. That's also a mark against the rolling teach. Its necessity in getting this thing to the table means that it's quite hard to bring a new player into your circle once you already know the rules. The rest of your table isn't going to want to sit for about an hour while just one person learns the ropes. Dare I say that this game is actually less complex than its BGG rating of 4.43 out of 5 suggests? Yes I dare. I dare very much. But I implore you to be realistic about the kinds of groups you have access to before making this game another aspirational purchase that will sit unplayed on your shelf gathering dust for months. It is exactly that for me already, and it's been part of my job to play this game for the past 6 months of my life. If you are pressing on anyway and are going to be that person who teaches John Company, then a great way to learn is the fantastic video from RTFM. Shay goes into great detail for the player who needs to be the one holding the rules in their head. Robust, complete, easy to follow, a fantastic resource for would-be colonizers such as yourselves. I thoroughly recommend it. All right, that's it. Admin done.
You've been trying to put off teaching them the game, haven't you?
No.
I think you have.
I've got to teach it now?
Listen, buddy, you've got to teach them at some point. Maybe now's the time.
Can I make it a bit smaller?
No, it's a big old game. You just got to put the whole thing in there.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh, it's going to be so boring.
Oh, they know that. They clicked on the video. It'll be fine. It'll be fine.
Oh, no. All right, let's go. This is an abridged teach of John Company 2nd edition, designed to give you the basic flavour of what's going on here, but missing out on loads of details. This teach might still be too much for some folks, but I wanted to keep it in here so we can give a sort of thematic grounding of what we're talking about later on. Plus I think some of the rules are just really cool. The basic game is played for 5 rounds, and each round proceeds by following this red ribbon along the edge of the board, stopping off at each individual step along the way. Broadly, we can split this ribbon into 3 sections. Your family acts, the company acts, and the world acts? Let's start with those company actions first. As this silver marker hits these spaces along the red ribbon, the corresponding family member takes the action depicted. The chairman can seek debt, and then must slop out company funds to its individual departments, the exact, often unequal division motivated by where they've got other employees, or by a sleek bribe from a fellow investor. The Director of Trade follows them. They can move ships between sea zones and writers between presidencies, as well as opening up orders in India, these oval spaces littering the map on the right side of the board. These orders represent deals the company can make to bring in profit and let trade flow, but we'll get back to those in just a little bit. The manager of shipping buys those ships in the first place, each one placed in the sea, allowing the company to fill exactly one of the orders opened earlier. Military Affairs follows them. They're the person in charge of assigning new recruits to the army boxes up here. The presidencies, however, are where the company actually does its thing. Each president can trade with their region's associated orders, placing these writers from the writer's box on each order filled, making the company that amount of money, with them getting a little bit of kickback in return. The other part of the president's turn belongs to the commander in their corresponding military box. They want to, essentially, wage war against the various fractured empires of India. If they succeed in their conquest, the empire recedes from that area of the board and its orders open for trade, with all troops involved taking a cut of what the game refers to as loot after any casualties are resolved. Then a new position, the governor, is established, a highly lucrative but risky role for the character choosing to fill it, allowing for further business to be conducted at the cost of stirring unrest in the region they govern. But how does any of that actually happen? Well, here it might be pertinent to explain the dice system that powers most of John Company, and this mechanic is something fierce. Almost all of the actions in John Company require you to roll a pool of dice, spending £1 for each dice you want to add to the pool. £5 spent, 5 dice rolled, with some external modifiers changing the number of dice you'll actually get to roll after spending your money. You then roll that fistful and look for the lowest value amongst the lot. If a 1 or a 2 is your lowest roll, then congratulations, you succeeded. That's the best possible outcome. A 3 or a 4 means that you failed, but you can spend money to roll the dice again, maybe a little fewer this time, making things riskier. A 5 or a 6 is the worst. It's a catastrophic failure, meaning not only do you fail the roll with no chance to roll again, but you're also immediately fired from your position.
I love these dice.
I think balancing all of John Company on the knife edge of a push-your-luck gambling game is an inspired choice. Players are keen to keep money in their treasuries, so they'll spend risky amounts on rolls, safe in the knowledge that they'll probably be able to just spend a squirt more cash and roll again, and not really think about what happens if they can't. The dice, like many other mechanics in this box, introduce chaos and risk into proceedings that gradually goad players into the profiteer's mindset. But we'll talk more about the dice a little later on. So that's the company operating, but what happens afterwards? This block of steps right at the end is where the company has stuff happen to it. The bonuses and revenue steps are administrative phases, where the company works out how much money it's made and can carry into the next round, after paying for its military, ships, debts, and snacks. Company standing, the abstract measure of how healthy your empire is at any given time, might raise or lower in this step, depending on if you pay out dividends to investors at £1 per company share, but will decrease if it made less money than folks expected it to. And if standing sinks low enough during the game, the company fails and the game ends prematurely. Another way that company standing can falter is during the events in India step, where India itself pushes back against company rule. Events are randomly drawn from a deck and have a variety of possible effects. From profitable windfalls to strengthening pieces to order closing turmoils. Most notable is the crisis event, though. When resolving one of these, the simmering tensions within the fractured empires of India finally spills out into actual violence. Sometimes this violence occurs between India's regions, causing them to band together or fall apart in and out of uneasy empire. More often though, this elephant representing those rising tensions will be pointed directly into a region controlled by the company. And if the company lacks a military to defend itself with in there, then that region will be lost. Writers will be killed, orders will be closed, and company standing will tank. A sliver of chaos injected into an already dysfunctional economic system. The round then closes with the Parliament meet step, where the player who is the Prime Minister, the owner of this absurd component, then gets to make laws that affect the rules for the rest of the game. These have broad effects, like reducing the cost of shipbuilding, or slashing the price of the military, or just getting rid of all of the company's debt. And players will use enterprises with this little symbol on them to vote for or against. And if players are out of legitimate enterprises to vote with, they can just spend money instead. £1 per vote. Lastly, we limp into the final set of actions that kick off the start of the round, that I described as the family actions. These are the maneuvering steps that get you into position to make your big plays for the rest of the round. The London season is where maybe the most important part of the game happens. Players roll dice for each family member under their employ to see whether they retire, one of the few ways to get points in the game. This works the same as most of the dice rolls. 1 or 2 does nothing, 3 or 4 adds attrition, which then compounds to add to later rolls, and a 5 or a 6 retires that family member for good. If your family member retires, it is at this point, and this point only, that you can spend money from your personal treasury to put them in one of these exciting Scottish retirement castles. A more lavish retirement earning you more points, but costing you more money both now and every turn for the rest of the game. Okay, final stretch here. Family is where players get to take the personal actions that set them up for the rest of the round. Things like buying shares, or shipyards, or workshops, or luxuries. Assets they can use later on. This is also where new blood gets injected into the company in the form of new officers or writers to go to the various presidencies. Hiring is the very last step. Any roles retired or fired now need to be filled, with each card listing who chooses the successor and from who they might hire from. Goodness gracious, I have skipped out on so many rules in that and have barely scratched the surface of all of the complexities of this game. It might seem wildly difficult, or actually pretty simple to you, depending on who you are and what kind of games you play. But every single phase of this game is more complex than I've made it sound, lacquered with bribery, negotiation, and trickery. Getting things done in this game is not easy. Let's talk about why. So, what does a round of John Company really look like? I've laid out the rules, sure, but I've not explained the motion, the feeling, the kinds of directions this game takes you in. So let's talk about the kinds of weeds you can get into through the lens of a game of John Company that I actually played. We've got 4 families here: pink, yellow, blue, and green. They've got proper names, but we'll keep things colourful. We're at the start of the 4th round of the game, just past the halfway point of our performance, and tensions are starting to rise inside the business. Yellow's chairman has a very high chance of retiring next round, which means there's positively gallons of blood in the water, and folks have already started making risky beds to lie in by retiring early after a few turns of profit, with little eye to securing the company's future. At this point in the game, our players are in the following mindsets. Yellow is trying to squeeze the last few drops of cash out of the chairman while they still can, hoping to enjoy a lavish retirement afterwards, playing bowls for eternity. Green is eyeing up that seat, hoping to leap into it once it's vacated while it's still warm, ushering the company into a new era of profitability with them at the helm. Blue doesn't have a strong company position, but they do have those military assets. They're hoping to use those to claim a bunch of prizes to pay for some stuff back home. And lastly, we've got pink. With little actual stake in the company, they're just quietly shoring up an anti-company position. We start with a family phase. Green snatches a share, yellow pops a writer in Bengal to capitalise on the president going free, blue ships more of their kids to the military, and pink buys another set of heinously expensive workshops to gamble on the company failing. Yellow then pays an extortionate bribe to pink in the hiring phase for the privilege of becoming the new president of Bengal over the other candidate. leveraging the role of chairman to distribute this round's budget with a heavy weighting towards the presidency they've just taken ownership of. The rest of the departments get the scraps, sowing seeds of dissent among the board. The pink director of trade then acts, and having already extorted yellow for most of their cash, it only takes a suggestion of a bribe from green to throw their plans further into disarray. Popping open a new order in Madras and shuffling 2 of the ships previously routed to Bengal into Madras's sea zone. The balance of trade completely swinging out from under blue and yellow and into the loving arms of green and pink. A complete reversal of fortune in such a small space of time. Pink then extends a small olive branch to yellow and blue by using their military affairs position to send blue officers into the Bombay Army Box. It's where they want to be, ready to campaign in order to expand the company's influence and take home their rightful share of the loot. This then immediately results in Blue's actions as commander in Bombay, where, casually looking at their retirement home's extortionate £4 per turn upkeep, exhausts their own officers to stamp out native resistance in the region, taking home just a few trinkets to put on the mantelpiece. Thing is, they decide to cut yellow out of the equation last minute in order to take home a greater share of the profits. Yellow is fuming at their supposed business partner for being the second person to double-cross them this round, and so sells their votes to Pink, the current Prime Minister, in return for Blue's £2 promise note that Pink had saved for a rainy day. They gladly accept the opportunity for further chaos. Blue, understanding that Pink will probably do something heinous with the votes if left to their own devices, buys their votes back off of Green. Their spoils of war looking positively paltry now they've been nibbled away by their partners. Green is then pleased with a good turn of trading in Madras, making the fact that the company didn't really do any military actions there sting just a little less. Yellow, on the other hand, is desperate for a big trade this turn. They're flat broke and need to have enough money in their coffers to pay for the chairman's imminent retirement due. Still frustrated at the lack of ships for a big turn of trading in Bengal, they turn to their governor, Green. They ask them to use their powers to construct a company ship, and Green isn't so sure. Building a ship requires 2 successful rolls of the dice on a dice pool that is sufficiently small that failure, or catastrophic failure, resulting in their firing, is a distinct possibility. So Yellow, desperate to secure some money, bribes them with a share, making Green first in line to be the next chairman after Yellow retires. Green warily accepts, pushing the local populace into the shipyards, causing murmurs of unrest in the process. Yellow, elated, rolls a chunky pool of dice and successfully pulls a good amount of cash in for both the company and themselves, their writers securing all manner of exports, and that retirement due becoming an inevitability. With presidencies now resolved, hope around the table is high. Despite Pink's tampering, everyone seems to have gained all that they were after. But hubris rears its head. Any hopes of a profitable company are immediately crushed. In the event step, a storm in the east trashes multiple ships, and a crisis in Bengal kills writers and seals off the whole region for further trading. What's worse, it's time for Parliament to meet, and oopsie-doopsie, it's war with France, an event that will not only weaken the company's already ailing fleet and disparate military, but also require window tax to fund it, making Blue's current retirement plans completely unaffordable. Blue desperately promises their trophies of war to Pink so as to not enact the law, but Pink is undeterred, renegotiating with Blue to take the trophies off their hands for just enough money to pay for the upkeep, and no more. Using both their own enterprises and cashing in the promissory note from Yellow earlier to pass a law that both Yellow and Blue absolutely detest. The military is gutted and the fleet decimated, every board member round the table fuming as the company's standing slides into the bin. Still, despite their misfortune, Yellow and Blue do manage to make it to the end of the round with enough cash to secure that juicy retirement. All they need to do is roll the dice that will surely spell Yellow vacating that position. Oh no. A 1 was the only possible roll that would mean that Yellow does not retire for this round, and yet here they are, stuck for another torturous year of this game. Feet perfectly encased in a rock-solid block of shareholders' concrete. Green is aghast that they do not take control of the company, but also maybe a bit thankful given its position. The family actions roll round again, and Pink buys another fleet of workshops. The shareholders scramble to get boats back on the ocean to pull the company from the gutter before it's all over. There is John Company at its best, a multiple-hour board meeting that evolves and breathes with player input, frothing with drama, hubris, and thematic tension as swings of fate forge desperate deals and risky rolls. Each player loosely bound together by the company you are simultaneously, cooperatively, both floating and sinking. This is a negotiation game unlike anything else on the market. Wheels within wheels within wheels. So many layered systems to bribe with, extort with, shark with. Everything being tradable all of the time presents a sandbox that is just so fluid, with players engaging with it in all kinds of eclectic, surprising, and unusual ways. Not a single player has engaged with this puzzle in the same way in the same game, let alone across different games, each and every session spilling out its own fable of colonialist greed. But it's those dice at the core of it all that tip the hand as to what John Company is. What presents to the eye in its fundamental beigeness as a steady-as-she-goes economic Eurogame where the right decisions lead to predictable outcomes rapidly shapeshifts in the mind of the player into one where twists come thick and fast, building out a game where you're constantly just trying to make the best from whatever situation is thrown at you. I spoke about how the dice make your actions into a push your luck game, and that's true. But risk management is, in reality, flecked through every single interaction in the game. In politics, in retirements, in the seas and events of India, making not just an endlessly compelling game, but also a focused, satirized slice of real-world history. It says so right on the front of the manual. You are not people explicitly trying to make the East India Company the most profitable it can be. You are ambitious families attempting to use the British East India Company for personal gain. Here's an observation that I will explain clumsily. The negotiation of this game, the constant bickering to get even the most basic things done, it creates intensely frictive relationships between players. When your ships sit unmanned, it hurts. When you get passed up for promotion, it stings. When your department doesn't get money and you do nothing on your turn because of it, the frustration easily spills out of the abstraction of the game and into very real, very personal discomfort. All of these real human feelings bubble into times where you feel as though you ought to actively mismanage the company you're running, so as to explicitly bite back at your colleagues, hurting the feelings of your fellow investors. Even when being responsible with your role might in reality make you more money, if there's even a slim chance that not towing the line will disrupt the plans of those who previously wronged you, you will take it. And there it really is. A game where players who are frustrated that they are not making the embarrassment of riches they expected will abuse the power of the most insidious corporation in the world. The very visible point system here does wonders to stoke the fires of this feeling. It is simply not enough that you succeed in your most ambitious plundering of India, it is that your peers must fail. This is where John Company's fundamental satire is at its most poignant and direct. It's humour akin to that of a Henry Fielding novel or Ben Jonson play, directly threading together these two different worlds, the landed gentry and their bourgeois squabbling directly connected to the consuming horrors of empire. This is where the game attains its most lofty thematic goals of representing imagined empire, where its ludic thesis on greed and its dehumanizing influence oozes from every sordid action of the players round the table. Here, it's where the game reveals the people behind this business not how they would choose to be remembered as revered, exalted barons of industry, but how they should be remembered. Gluttonous, incompetent, opportunistic, and barbaric. I'm standing outside of Powys Castle in Wales. Not just a spectacular backdrop for this video, not just a beautiful castle that wouldn't look out of place down the left-hand side of John Company's board, but home to the Clive Collection, the largest private collection of looted Indian artifacts in the UK. So, who is this Clive? Well, Robert Clive, or Clive of India, as he's best known, has been many things. A schoolyard bully, a ruthless colonialist, a titan of industry, and eventually Lord Vulture, one of the most hated men in the country.
But he was mostly one thing and one thing only: unfathomably rich.
At the start of this video, I mentioned that the East India Company was responsible for killing an estimated 1/3 of the population of Bengal, and if there is one person that history squarely blames for this fact, it's Robert Clive. He ruthlessly exploited the territory he was charged with, requisitioning land that was primarily used for farming to instead grow and export opium. And when poor harvests created a scarcity of food, there was no backup plan. Why would there be? He, much like the rest of the East India Trading Company, was only there for big profits now. We weren't allowed to film inside of the museum at Palace Castle. Photography is prohibited due to the private nature of the collection, so all we've got here is what I recorded before becoming aware that photography wasn't cool. But when you walk around its halls, John Company becomes painfully real. When you observe firsthand the wealth and opulence this terrible business created and stole, the horror of what you just played dawns on you. It becomes tangible and it becomes terrifying.
I said right at the head of this video that about 50% of the people I played this game with never wanted to play it again, and for a large chunk of those people, that reason was the setting, not the theme. Folks who I played this game with were made dramatically uncomfortable because the setting reduces a gaping historical wound into a game. One that you gladly participate in, likely laughing your way through people making bad business decisions and getting skewered by their own greed. Its satire is focused around that greed, and the people it affected are pushed to the sidelines. To many, many people, this game uses horror as its playground. It revels in a period of history so monstrously evil that to even represent it is an act of violence. No matter its intentions, it cannot escape the gravity of that terror. To put that into a game, into a commercial product bought and sold ostensibly for entertainment, is, for plenty of folks, too vile to stomach, an affront to marginalized populations where the lingering effects of colonial rule are felt profoundly. I would not argue with anyone for which the conversation begins and ends right there.
Now, of course, there are folks in the comments of various places who are going to be saying things like, "Who cares about the backdrop for a game?
Who cares about its theme? It's just a game. They're just for escapism. Please, I need my escapism. Stop bringing politics into my games."
Well, firstly, if you are one of those people, it's hilarious that this game would produce those sentiments. Something so directly concerned with its politics, something running with this setting of all settings, something designed by these people of all people. I am frequently both bemused and sickened by conversations where people assume engaging with theme and setting is somehow insulting to the designer or secondary to the conversation. Is it not somehow more insulting to disregard entirely whole swathes of work that pertain to a game's theme and setting? More disrespectful to turn rich, creative works of player-driven art into just games? If you are one of those people, then but also, you just got tricked.
John Company's whole construction is designed to draw the connection between the game you are playing and the game they were playing. It's how the satire operates. The detached perspective is part of the mission statement. This is familiar territory for Whirligig. PAX Pamir's second edition takes place in a period of history known as the Great Game, where various empires used Afghanistan as their playground for various international disputes, where the local population were exploited by, and themselves exploited, that political climate. It was just a game to them as it is to you. Applying this perspective to John Company, we see a game that spreadsheets genocide because the East India Company did exactly that, turning land into a resource and people into probabilities, gambling on very real generational damage just to turn a profit. It was just a game to them as it now is to you. And this line of thinking creeps into another argument, that John Company isn't the conversation in and of itself, it's the start of an inquest, a reckoning with yourself where your reaction is part of the art. I think a lot about this cartoon from Ad Reinhardt where silly little man asks a painting a question. What does it represent? The painting then claps back with the fantastic, "What do you represent?" And a caption at the bottom reads, "An abstract painting will react to you if you react to it. You get from it what you bring to it. It will meet you halfway, but no further. It is alive if you are. It represents something, and so do you. You, sir, are a space too." Also, the guy at the bottom of the cartoon is dead for some reason. My headcanon is that he got owned so hard by the painting that he cringed to death. He got dumpstered. Clown! I think this is a great way to look at an awful lot of modern art, especially work that is violent or destructive or obscene. Here, your interpretation is the art. Your opinion is the art. The way it sticks in your mind is the art, as much as the painting or sculpture or banana taped to a wall. But unlike most modern art, John Company asks more of you than merely observing. It asks for your participation. If this game is art, it is not Guernica, it is not The Face of War, it is not Les Desastres de la Guerra, it is f***ing hell. A voyeuristic and direct piece that you're surrounded by and immersed in, where your engagement creates complicity. A work that can just as easily be totally disengaged with as completely enthralled by, but will repel anyone just a little bit, no matter how you slice it. This perspective can turn John Company into something of a challenging chunk of group performance art, a game that creates similar feelings of unease as Train or Meltwater. But come and advocate for the devil with me for a little bit. Puerto Rico is a commonly cited example of the problem with colonialism in board games. You take brown worker discs from trade ships to work your fields that produce, well, they produce what you'd expect them to produce. But if you so dared, you could apply the same logic here. There is a detachment from Puerto Rico that has you playing the game as an observer, playing a game as they played a game. You view these people in the same way that plantation owners did, and there, the game acts as a statement. To reiterate, I'm playing devil's advocate here. Puerto Rico just isn't doing that, and John Company has both suggestions for further reading and asks its players to consent to its exploration before playing. Typical colonialist games will just take your consent as given as they suddenly throw slavery upon you. They carelessly chuck human cargo into the mix because they didn't think about the implications of playing through that situation, and they don't want you to either. John Company at least asks for permission to explore, which is 99.9% more work than other games will do.
It is, evidently, engaging with its theme on a very serious and direct level, the historical background of the design team touching every inch of the cardboard that's in front of you, allowing John Company far more freedom to explore the morally grey territory it's confronting you with. This game is clearly thinking a lot about its setting, and it wants you to do so as well.
But I do think that perhaps John Company's own internal logic only applies if you bless it with intentionality. Intentionality suggested by its preface, but only truly gleaned from knowing, or more likely trusting, where the design is coming from. And remember, both John Company and Pax Pamir now have second editions from Whirligig Games that very much feel like more rounded versions of their original publications from Sierra Madre Games, the publishing house from Phil Eklund that would shoehorn in some, quite questionable writing? Awful. These second editions feel like reclamations of the politics of the first, more keen to outwardly promote more realistic versions of history. This context is enlightening in pinpointing the direction of the game you are sat down playing. But the problem here is that to many folks I played with, the design alone did not do the heavy lifting here on first blush to cement the narrative perspective and intentions of the game. When people sat down to John Company, I warned them that it was an exploration they needed to consent to, but other than that, I let the game do the talking. And almost all of the folks I played with felt a bit grossed out by the game and its theme, regardless of disclaimers or intentions. They did not knowingly approach it as a space, they approached it as a game. Making them actors in a more intelligent exhibition, sure, but frustrated, angry, upset, or unknowing participants. I think this is my main concern, and the concern of a circle of players around me, that John Company is almost the right game at the wrong time. A critique arriving in a time where board gamers are either inherently distrusting of such themes due to a long and lasting legacy of deeply problematic table games, or they don't care either way, rendering those political goals inert as players are fundamentally incurious of continuing to investigate the subject matter the game is portraying. Look, there is of course no shortage of intelligent, barbed satire in the design here. Take for example the word loot, referring to money gained in military campaigns. On first blush, it's a word that betrays the savagery of the colonialist mindset. Spoils or treasure or rewards are words that practically describe the thing itself, but loot is chosen. There is no nobility in the word loot. It is a nasty word for a nasty business. But there's a second layer. Loot's etymology stems from lutna, a Sanskrit word to describe, get this, stealing. There is a withering and dark irony for this word being used in this context, a stolen word for stolen wealth. Genius! But I was only made aware of this connection by reading and listening to the work of William Dalrymple, who I would thoroughly recommend. His work is just great and really good if you want to get more of a perspective on this subject matter. I used a ton of his stuff for this video, you can probably tell if you've listened or read any of it. For many, the conversation will start and end with the one time they played it, and this layer will remain untapped. Quinn's brought up similar concerns upon seeing the Sepoy recruitment card in the game, looking around the table to find the gaze of at least one person who knew the historical context of what the card was referring to. But no, it bounced straight off our brains at the time, rendering its political context and satire inert through our collective ignorance. I think that John Company struggles because its mission statement is to inhabit imagined empire, a clever but detached viewpoint that gives a wonky first impression reliant on authorial intervention. In a way, John Company is in itself a genius move to subvert the "it's just a game" narrative, as utterance of that statement means you are complicit in showing the power of turning people into cubes and violence into dice. But for some people, it's still just too toxic a subject matter to comfortably play in. It's satire hamstrung by the culture of board games it currently exists in.
Now, there's probably folks who have switched off this video by now because A, they're bored, it's a long video, I know, I'm sorry, or B, because they're outraged by a contradiction. How come we've given so much time to talking about John Company's theme, and yet we'll gladly play in the sandbox of a game like, say, Undaunted? A game about the Second World War where one player gets to have a fun go at being a Nazi. That game has no warning, no permission slip, no suggestions for further reading on the back of the manual. Why is that okay? To me, there's a whole bunch of reasons. Direct conflict versus colonialism, the difference in abstraction, the fact that maybe it actually isn't okay, and we need to examine our own biases predicated on understandings of the good war. These are beyond the scope of this video, but there is a big one that I want to dwell on. John Company hits different, as the kids say, if you're British. I mostly played this game with Brits, and it's that group for whom the box was most grim. And a huge factor in that is simply because education on the matter is still so poor, and the cultural climate in the UK seeks to be ever more revisionist around the British Empire. British politicians in the 2020s seem ever more empowered to make huge, sweeping statements about Britain's colonial past. It only takes a cursory Google search to find several visible sources showing Jacob Rees-Mogg and Suella Braverman, currently sitting MPs, declaring loudly and publicly that they are proud of the British Empire. Not proud to be British or other such tacit dog whistles, but proud of empire specifically. We are in a culture currently in which the wrongdoing committed by these actors is continually swept under the rug, diminished, and in many circles, valorized. It's perhaps not fair to John Company. We're being presented with this game at a time where sensible people are on high alert for games that leave Empire up to interpretation because of how far the Overton window on "was colonialism bad" has seemingly shifted. The second result that comes up if you Google around for the Clive collection comes from a hilariously rosy-tinted article from the rightward-leaning Restore Trust that paints Robert Clive as nothing more than a perfectly pleasant art collector. Robert Clive's statue still stands outside the Foreign Office to this day, a truly disturbing reminder of how little this company wants to learn about itself. I do think, personally, I've a lot to thank this game for, as far as pushing me into researching the past of the country I live in, the empire it created, and the horrors that we, as Brits, routinely ignore. I think this game will be controversial for a whole lot of people. I think this game will be unplayable for a whole lot of people. I think it deals with a really sticky, thorny subject matter that's uncomfortable, both in the way that players interact with it and in the way the game itself presents.
But I do think if you travel down the path this game might start you on, it becomes something else. It becomes that work of art. Textured, rich, and utterly enthralling. A shining light of what board games can do. At the end of this video, I wanted to recommend a broad selection of other works to check out if you're interested in this game, or the history around it, or board games more generally, I suppose. First up, obviously, I will absolutely recommend William Dalrymple's The Anarchy. This is a book that I leaned on heavily for the research for this video. Seriously, all of the good bits are basically ripped straight from this thing. The whole Lutner-Loot connection, it's like the first words of the book. Powis Castle, Robert Clive, it's all in here. It's shameless how much I've stolen from this thing. If you've read it, it's probably quite embarrassing to watch this video. I'm sorry, William Dalrymple, for sort of reducing your book to the low art of a board game video. It's also recommended on the back of John Company's manual, a fact that I literally only just realised today, one day before this video is due to go out. Whee! Inglorious Empire is also on the back of there, an even toothier reply to revisionist history that's just as gripping as The Anarchy. I'd also really suggest that curious folks watch No Pun Included's excellent video essay on colonialism in board games. A perfectly pointed bit of criticism that is perfect for folks looking to get more of an insight into the themes of the games we consume all the time. It's just great. If you're interested in learning more about John Company, the board game specifically, then Dan Thoreau's review over on his website Spacebiff is a gorgeous and thorough dive into the game. There is truly no one better writing about board games right now.
And now for the slightly awkward part of the ending of this video, where I acknowledge that this video was meant to come out whilst Molly House, the next game from Whirligig Games, was still in crowdfunding. It's a game that explores the flourishing queer culture of 18th century London facing off against those who sought to tear it down. A deep, interactive, historical game bedecked in a fancy party dress. I missed that deadline because I got ill and the on-location sections of this video had to be pushed back because of it. So this is the part of the video where I was supposed to tell you that you go ahead and back that game, but you can't now. The funding period has ended. Sorry. Instead, I'll just strongly suggest that you follow Whirligig Games on their socials to keep an eye out for whatever project it is they bring to crowdfunding next. It's important that the work you want to see in the world is supported, and as complex and unusual and potentially controversial a text as John Company is, I want more unusual, odd stuff like it to exist in games. Molly House will inevitably start another journey, just as interesting, rewarding, and thought-provoking as this one was. I cannot wait.
And finally, a bit of a shameless plug. If you want to support Shut Up and Sit Down in making videos like this one, then please consider donating through our website or Patreon. As a reward for your patronage or website donationage, you'll get access to our bonus bits, a whole bunch of extra videos and podcasts exclusively for donors, as well as early access to a select few videos. We tie it all up in a monthly newsletter, so you've got all your extra bits in one place. And that's the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching, and if you support us through our website or Patreon, doubly thank you for making big, sprawling, immersive projects like this possible. Appreciate it very much, and here's to the next one.